department. And we are really grateful to have this webinar on assistive technology gaming devices. So right now you're looking at a screen and you see some logos. We are working in partnership with Martha Morehouse and with the Ohio State University Wexner Medical Center. In front of you, we have logos of who is being part of this. This webinar is being really sponsored by the Ohio Department of Developmental Disabilities through their grant called the Ohio Family Network. And it's been going on since January 2020, and we just heard we'll have a continuation after this year. So on the right, you'll see a Charting the Life course logo. We are supporting Charting the Life course as amazing tools that would help in communication, problem solving, anything a person with developmental disability or intellectual disability can use to help get their vision of themselves, their goals, and that kind of thing. So I really see the tools being used here as working with a specialist to increase their life with gaming, something my daughter enjoys. So who are we at the Center for Disability Empowerment? We are a 501c3 non-residential Center for Independent Living, or CIL, that is driven by choice and direction of people with disabilities. Our mission at CDE is to provide supports and resources for people with disabilities in order for them to be participants and contributors in their communities as they live, learn, worship, work, and play alongside people who do not have disabilities. We are federally mandated to offer 5 core services, but I say and more because obviously we have more than 5. Information referral is one of them, independent living and development, advocacy, whether it's self or systems, transition services for youth, transition services for nursing homes / housing, healthcare outreach coordinator, employment specialist, peer support, and systems support. Would you please turn off your microphones for this time, and then we'll let you know when we can open that up. So we have 2 lovely people joining us today, and Gabby, who has a wonderful violet color hair, and she can wave, and Gabrielle. So Christine Kennedy is an OTD, OTR/L. She's an Ambulatory Rehabilitation Assistive Technology Center, Martha Morehouse Pavilion. Gabrielle Kowalski, OTS, is currently an occupational therapy doctoral student, working on her capstone with a focus on Ambulatory Rehabilitation Assistive Technology Center, Martha Morehouse Pavilion. So I'm going to stop sharing, but I have some questions to ask our speakers. So let me do that right now. And then I can pin and Gabby, you guys are sharing on. All right.
Yes, so I'm going to go ahead and start sharing.
Okay, so Gabrielle, you and I, we were talking, you and Gabrielle, Christine and Gabrielle were talking about what got them involved in this field. So maybe we'll start with Christine and then Gabrielle.
Okay, first of all, can everyone see the start of the PowerPoint here?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So my name is Christy. I got into this just because I like doing a little bit of everything. It looks at somebody holistically, and in the AT Center, we do a little bit more than even, OTs at other places. We work hands-on with people's wheelchairs, and we, work to set up people's technology to meet their needs, and we even do drive-through rehab here. So I just like getting my hands dirty and helping people get set up with any assistive tech. So I've always been into that. I always like the combining, you know, creativity and art and the science of healthcare all together. I don't think there's anything better than OT out there, but that's just me.
And how about you, Gabrielle?
Yeah, so I actually started in an engineering side of things in undergrad, and then was exposed to occupational and physical therapy, and realized that instead of working in a workshop, I want to like work with the people who I'd be building for in that workshop. And I just really love, like Christy was saying, like we're a really holistic profession. And so I like being able to bridge what I know about technology and adaptive equipment with the people that I work with and supporting their independence using those things. And OT allows me to do that. So I've been doing that here, and for gaming specifically, it kind of fell into my lap as a capstone project, and I ran with it, and I really enjoy it. So we're here just to talk about all of it today. We're really excited.
Well, that's great. Now, Christine, you do something else called the driver rehab specialist, right?
Yes. So I am a driver rehab specialist here. We have a whole team here that are full-time dedicated to driver rehab. They're all occupational therapists, and they have a special credential called a CDRS. I don't carry that credential just because I mix and match what I do every day. But I am still a specialist in it. So what we do for driver rehab is we help somebody that had an injury or a disability get into driving or get back into driving. So we complete driving evaluations, and we do training here as well with our adaptive equipment.
Well, we actually have a staff member at the Center for Disability Empowerment who is a paraplegic herself, and she had benefited from the driving lessons, and she is an excellent driver. And
I'm sure.
and the other thing you guys taught her how to do, which scared the heck out of us, was she learned how, in a case of a fire, she learned how to go backwards in her wheelchair down the steps. Yes, yes. And watching it is horrible. But she learned how to navigate it, because, you know, you never know. There might be that experience, and she can be, but I imagine not a lot of people want to try that. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and let you guys take this away. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thanks, Deb. I love those questions. Thanks for letting me talk about our program. We have so much to offer here at the Assistive Technology Center. But today we're here to just talk about one little subset of the things that we do. So Gabby and I will be discussing adaptive gaming and accessibility options today. You already learned a little bit about us, but again, I'm an OT here, and Gabby is an OT doctoral student. She actually just wrapped up her defense, and she is now Dr.
Technically, yeah.
She is now Dr. Gabby. So we are ready to welcome her into this career, and she'll do well everywhere she goes. But so today's objectives, we want to show you some hardware and accessibility options for gaming in general. There are so many to go over and show you. I do want to say, if people have questions, or even if you've tried out one of the options we discuss and you want to share your experience with it, please do so in the chat. We like to be interactive with this, so if you have any comments at all, we'll pause and address things live, especially if you have questions. If you'd rather hold off till the end, though, that's cool. We'll still have kind of an open session at the end for people to talk with us. So we're going to talk about options for hardware and accessibility, and then learning about how do we actually assess for someone's adaptive gaming needs. So how do we identify access options, and kind of where do you start with gaming? And then finally, we also want to talk about how, do you refer to us? How can we help you more? And, letting you know which clinicians here can help with adaptive gaming. So let's dive right on in. So first things first, what is adaptive gaming? So really it's the use of any equipment or accessibility settings, which we group together and call accessible gaming options, to play mainstream video games. So there's a whole lot to adaptive gaming, and it might look different than what you think in your head. So let's talk more about that. So these are the types of gaming. So I think when most people think about video gaming in general, you're thinking more of like what we call console gaming. So that's like somebody that plays on an Xbox system or a PlayStation, even a Nintendo. But there's a whole lot more to the world of gaming than just that. There's also PC gaming, which I would say is probably just as popular as console gaming. That's anyone that uses just like a computer system to play their game. So they'll use a mouse and a keyboard to game. You can also use a controller, you know, with your computer screen being your screen. And then people that play PC gaming, just like console gaming, you can play, you know, online and play with other people that are out there in the world, or you can play it closed and just play certain games by yourself. We'll talk more about those kind of things as we get into it. But then there's even more than that out there too. So there's mobile gaming. So think like Candy Crush, you know, anytime somebody plays a game on their cell phone or even on their tablet, their iPad, that's all mobile gaming too. That counts in this. And then also handheld gaming. So things like, if any of us that are on, remember, you know, Game Boys or, you know, the different, you know, handheld options that are there, but also like you can play Yahtzee, Simon, you know, all those things. Anything that you would play and hold the game itself is also part of this. So why is gaming important? So, you know, to me, like we were talking about at the beginning, OT, you know, looks at everything you're doing. So when somebody has like an acquired disability, a lot of your rehabilitation time is spent, you know, focusing on what OTs or PTs consider like the basics. We got to get you eating by yourself, dressing by yourself, bathing by yourself, anything that you need to just get you from the hospital to home. Those are the things that are targeted first. And then even when you go through the process, you know, you're getting into maybe more complex things, but it's all geared towards, you know, just the things that essentially keep you alive or keep you as independent in those things as possible. When you're in a setting like this, where we're outpatient and people come to see us, a lot of times no one has been, no one's asked them to this point, hey, do you have any trouble doing what's fun for you? You know, do you have any trouble video gaming? Do you have any trouble accessing your computer, surfing the web? So that's what we do in this space. So, you know, it allows us to, you know, once you've met the other goals that are just as important, we can also get into, okay, but what is actually meaningful to you? Same thing for people that have had congenital disability. You spend a lot of your life as you're developing, putting energy into getting you ready to participate in school or in work. But you know, it's just as important in my eyes to look at what's fun for you too. What things are you doing outside of that time? So that's gaming. So in our opinion, access to gaming influences your everyday life. And Gabby's going to tell us more about what makes gaming so important.
Before Gabby talks, Pam wrote down, we have a few blind consumers who like to game. And Judy said she's starting a tech lab and library in Clark County.
Oh, cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah, we're going to talk a little bit about vision accessibility too in a little bit. So stay tuned. Thanks for the questions.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so before we dive fully into it, I just want people to understand the scope of video gaming. Like, yes, the activities that clients like, but why is it, you know, such a big deal? Well, there's actually been a lot of research done on gaming, and some reports say that there are about 2.6 billion players of digital games worldwide. That's a lot of people. And then when you're looking at the US, about 66% of US citizens play digital games, and that translates to 215.5 million people. When you take those statistics and match them up with some disability statistics and do some mathematical magic, some research studies have reported that there may be 46.3 million potential gamers with disabilities. And that's a lot of people. Maybe they have met their access needs, but that means there may also be a lot of people who have not met their access needs. That's what we can help with. And then even taking that a step further into our Ohio population, as of 2020, our population here is 11.73 million people. So when, again, you're looking at those statistics with who plays games, that's going to be at least, you know, a few million people who have the ability or interest to play games who we can help with here.
A lot of people.
It's a lot of people. And then in just like another perspective of that, so in 2010, the gaming industry brought in over $25 billion in the US. When you compare that to, say, like the Canada box office, which brought in 10.8 billion, the US really likes our games. So it's a really big deal, here, and that means it's important to us. So there's, like I said, there's been research done on video games, and recently that's been shying away from the, oh, video games are bad, to like, no, actually video games are like really great, and here's why. And so there is one organization called the Entertainment Software Association. They kind of are like the overseer of video game industry in the US, and they put out an annual report about the effects and characteristics of gamers and games they play. And so the 2022 report, data was collected during the pandemic. So a lot of this stuff is reflected in that. So looking at that first graphic, why do video gamers like playing video games? And the obvious reason is because it's fun. People enjoy playing it. It's a cool thing to do. But also people say that they play to connect with other people, and it inspires them, to learn new things, to challenge themselves. And a lot of people also say, like that 89% statistic, that video games provide stress relief, especially in our world today. There's a lot going on. And so to have an activity that, you can use to cope with your emotions and whatever thing that's going on is really important. And also some parents say that, it allows their child to develop the skills to cope with emotions, with winning and disappointment in a healthy way. So video games really have a lot of effects that way. And looking at the statistics on the right side there, 67% of parents agree that video games helps their child connect with friends and family during the pandemic. We all know that the pandemic was very isolating, and you couldn't do outdoor activities. You couldn't, go down the street to the local library and spend time with people, but people could video game, and they could video game online with friends. And so that really was a leisure occupation that allowed people to connect, and that's why it's important. And again, 83% of people say that games introduce people to new friendships and relationships, and that's up from 78% in past years. So again, the pandemic influence there, that people were really grateful for video games during this time.
I love those statistics.
Yeah, I think they're very cool. I'm kind of obsessed with the ESA's report. They did a fantastic job. And one thing I want to note before getting into the graphic on this page is that the report did not, report on the demographics of the people surveyed. They had 4,000 people surveyed, but they did not necessarily say if those people had disabilities or did not. So it was very much a mix of disabled and not disabled gamers. And so, it's cool to see the statistics and what everyone's saying. And so, yes, there's reasons why people play video games, but what are the benefits of it? So as you can see kind of on the middle and left side of the screen here, like we know, people are playing to have fun, for the connection, but also as like an escape from reality, which, for a lot of people, you have a lot of challenges going on. So it's a nice way to kind of take a step back from that for a little bit. And some people say to like use your brain, the mental stimulation. The younger generation is looking more at it as like an entertainment side and connect with friends and family. Whereas, older adults apparently reported playing more to, keep their brain sharp and as a way to pass the time. So there's something for everyone of every age in gaming, which I think is really cool. And then on that right side there, it's just really interesting to see that, really high statistics of people saying, yes, it was much needed for me during the pandemic. Yes, it does connect with other people. And that statistic, that's 90% of people say that video games can be an accessible experience for people with different abilities. So again, this is a mix of disabled and non-disabled gamers, and they're all saying, hey, this is an activity, it's kind of unlike any other activity out there that can be made fully accessible to people.
We love that. And just checking really quick, can everyone hear us okay?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Deb.
So kind of taking, even a step deeper into the benefits of gaming, there's been a lot of research that has been emerging thanks to the advent of accessible gaming options. that's focusing on the quality of life impacts of video gaming participation on individuals with disabilities specifically. So, finally not excluding people with disabilities from that research, which is, needed and should be common sense, but we're glad we made it. And so looking at those quality of life impacts, people in a variety of research studies reported that participation in video gaming can promote positive mental health, that it can decrease depression and decrease anxiety. And alone, it's not going to do that. We know that mental health is, a consideration of multiple factors, but to be able to participate in a meaningful activity where you can cope with emotions, where you have stress relief, where you have a sense of accomplishment, that's contributing to that decreased depression and anxiety. And for similar reasons, it can increase self-esteem. So when you're being able to accomplish things in that video game, maybe when you're not able to do so in other aspects of your life, and you're able to connect with others. And a big thing that people with disabilities reported in this literature is that video gaming is one of the few activities that allows them to feel equal to non-disabled peers. Because when you have full access based on your configuration and you're on screen and you're a character, you can do as well as you can with gaming. And some people choose to disclose disability, some people don't. And so it's a really cool community that exists for gaming. And I think that's what leads to that increased social connectedness and self-esteem and the life satisfaction when you're able to do what you enjoy doing and you feel a sense of accomplishment from it. So that's why video gaming has been really cool. And then lastly, just looking at the cognitive side of video games, what are those effects? One of the research studies reported that because video gaming, in those, a lot of times you have to do some creative problem solving, or you have to take really analytical view on how to, complete your quest or like win the race, or you may have to cooperate with other players. It really helps you develop abstract problem solving skills and teaches you how to analyze tough problems. So people didn't really think that video gaming can help you in daily life. Yes, it can. It really gives you a lot of skills that you wouldn't expect. And then lastly, I think what's cool about video gaming is that, the setup that you're using, whether that's through buttons, a normal controller, a mouse, any of those accessibility settings for that hardware that you're using to access the game, the screen, the computer, whichever device, you can use that to then access other things in your life too. So we can use that setup and use those ideas to get you access to your computer or your phone or environmental controls in your home. So increasing your independence in gaming may also help you increase your independence in other aspects of your life too.
Absolutely. That's what we're all about here. Thank you, Gabby. So we've talked all about the benefits of gaming. So now you might be wondering, okay, but who's going to help me with this? So obviously, I'm talking on this, so I'm one of the people here that can help. But in general, adaptive gaming is part of the healthcare conversation at a lot of hospital systems right now. OSU just being one of them. So in general, if you're looking for specific help for adaptive gaming, you'd want to see an occupational therapist and or a rehab engineer or assistive technology professional or even a recreational therapist. So all of these professions are pretty vastly different, but they can all come together to help you with adaptive gaming needs. I will say the picture at the top of this page here is most recent photo from our clinic here. So this is all of us on the staff for the seating and wheelchair side, I should say. It's missing all of my driving OT friends, but one of the people that is pretty much always part of the team when we have you see us for adaptive gaming is our rehab engineer. Her name is Liz. And just a quick plug to her, she's awesome, and you're going to meet with her next week in the next Tuesday series. She'll be talking about smart home things. So we like to pair the brain of an OT, looking at you from your healthcare needs, what do you need to actually get into the game, and then Liz looks at you from the engineering side as, okay, but how can we connect all, your game switches or your software, your hardware to make this actually work functionally. So it's a really good team that we have here. I'm super excited about it all the time. But in general, know that anywhere you get your healthcare, an OT is a great person to start with. So what do we do at our gaming program? So when you come to see us, you would complete an occupational therapy evaluation. Those of you in the chat, you might have experienced one before. Maybe you have never had an OT eval. So what we would do in relation to adaptive gaming is we're gonna very first and foremost, we wanna know your goals for gaming. What do you actually wanna do? Are you trying to get back into a game that you used to play a lot? Or have you been doing things a certain way for a long, long time, but now you're just trying to make it more efficient? Or maybe something about your body has changed and you played the game a certain way before, and now you need a totally different way to play, or you just want someone else to look at it. So the first question we're gonna have for you is, why are you coming to see us? What do you want us to help with? What are your goals? That's what we target everything towards. Next, just like any other occupational therapy eval, we would do a whole comprehensive, assessment. We'd look at your physical needs and we'd look at your complete medical history and background. Put that all together. Like I said, we like to look at your whole picture as a person. It's one thing that you want to get back into gaming, but what else is playing a role in these contexts and needs that you have? Then we're going to look at your current function for gaming. A lot of times what we really love to do is have you bring in your own setup. So if there's a certain controller you use or a keyboard and a mouse that you use, we ask you to bring that with you the first time you see us. That way we can see it, how are you actually doing it right now? So we're going to assess that current function. And then while we're looking at that, we're going to look at, okay, if that isn't working, if there's something about that that isn't going well, we're going to look at finding another access point. So there might be something about how you're currently playing that works really well for you. We'll count that as an access point. So for example, if somebody, plays on a PC game and they use a mouse and they're really good at moving the mouse, but they can't quite click the mouse anymore, we're going to say, okay, what's another way to access your ability to make that click function happen? So then once we kind of get a game plan with that, then we trial out the equipment options that we have here in the clinic. And like I said, if you had other options you wanted to bring, that counts as a trial too. We're trialing what you have versus what we have. And then finally, the whole point of seeing us is so we can customize resources for you. We can tell you, what kind of people and organizations would you go to get yourself set up with these things. And we'd make some recommendations about what would be your best setup for your adaptive gaming experience. So part of this, the whole goal is to give you an accessible player experience. So just like a lot of other similar things in the world of assistive technology, it's kind of like a hierarchy. So we're always starting from, okay, what can we do to get you better access to your game without throwing in a bunch of complex stuff? So we're looking at, okay, what can we do with your current system first? So the first place we like to look at is your accessibility settings. So whatever gaming hardware you're using, whether it be a console or a computer or a phone, we want to dive right into those settings and figure out, okay, is there something that's turned off that maybe we could turn on that might help you? Then we go into, standard input with modifications. So what that means is, if you have a certain controller, like you see in that middle picture there, that gentleman is holding an Xbox controller. So we're saying, okay, what can we do that is something that is already something you have? Can we maybe modify it in some way? Maybe it's the positioning, maybe it's the switch, maybe it's something else to make that same system work for you. If that doesn't work, then we move into adaptive equipment in general. You see that picture there kind of getting onto the right side, but still in the middle, we got some joysticks, different kind of joystick options there. So we look at that if somebody has trouble, using their thumbs, or you need to use a different part of your body to make your player in the game move. But there's all kinds of adaptive equipment out there, so that's what we move on to next. And then finally, if nothing, really exists that's off the shelf, I should say, or something that you could purchase yourself, if none of that really exists, then we're looking at doing something totally custom. And I will say, we don't make custom equipment here at our clinic. That's not one of the services we provide. But we absolutely would help you with finding resources for somebody who could do that if that's something you needed. So all the way up the hierarchy, our main goal is to figure out, is there something about what you have that we can make work better? And if that doesn't work, we got a slew of other options. So
I have a quick question. Do you serve mostly adults or do you serve children as well?
yeah, actually, we serve both. I would say our clinic as a whole, we primarily see adults in this space. They're coming in for wheelchair needs or for driving needs, but we also see children as well. I think mostly it's been adolescents that want to come game with us, teens, yeah. But yeah, we see anybody, any age. If you want a game, you come hang out with us. So let's get into, okay, what actual options exist out there. So first, we're going to talk about hardware options. So kind of like I was mentioning earlier, there are options that are consumer grade. So those are ones that, you know, anybody could find and purchase online or at a gaming store. Then there's ones that are a little bit more customized. So maybe they exist for you to purchase on your own, but you might need help with where do you go to find that. And then there's also 3D printed options as well, which I consider kind of like customized, but it's kind of its own world of things. Yeah. So, you know, there's all kinds of ways to get your hardware. So let's talk about what are those options. So here's what we have just in general at our program. We don't have it all, but we do have quite a bit. So the console that we use is, I call it like an example piece. If somebody doesn't have a console or couldn't bring it with them, is we have an Xbox One S. So this is a little bit of an older model, but it still does a trick for what somebody needs. We also have the Xbox One controller. That's just the standard typical gaming controller. And then we also have the Xbox adaptive controller, which you can see on the bottom right-hand side there. We love that thing. That is pretty much a really good go-to option. We'll talk more about why we think that's a good go-to later, but we definitely use that quite a bit for just about anyone that's trying to get into adaptive gaming. We also have, it's kind of like a pair. We have the Logitech Adaptive Gaming Kit, which you see just above that adaptive controller on the right-hand side there. It's got all kinds of switches. It's got Velcro pads to attach the switches to help somebody access the buttons if they're just too darn small to get a hold of. We also have some Warfighter Engage adaptive joysticks. Those are the joysticks on the bottom left there in the picture. Those are actually 3D printed. So it's kind of both consumer grade and 3D printed. But those we can use, like I was saying, if you need a different way to make your player move, a joystick is a good place to start. A lot of people also that operate a power wheelchair for their mobility are very used to using a joystick to get around. If you use a joystick to get around your chair, a lot of times it's a good idea to have a similar setup for gaming. So we have a lot of those options as well. We also have some iPad tablets that we can look at settings for that if you game on an iPad. We have our own laptop computers that we are always willing to pull open and look at those settings if you have something similar. And we have a whole bunch of what I consider like low-tech equipment options. We have styluses, we have keyboards, mouse options. We got a whole bunch of things really for just computer access in general. But you know, sometimes that works for gaming just as well.
Yeah, and I would say too, like Christy said, that we don't have everything, but we have a lot. And what we do have allows us to mock up like anything that does exist that we could help you with, which is a really nice part of the tools that we have here.
For sure. So then we'll talk about like different equipment as well. So, you know, a lot of these pictures are still things that we have in our space, but just in general, kind of like that hierarchy picture I showed you earlier, there's kind of a hierarchy to this equipment as well. So the first thing we start with is like just, you know, I call it basic, but it's still really not, basic controller modifications. So, you know, maybe you just need a built-up joystick. Maybe you just need to use a stylus to access your touchscreen. Maybe you need better positioning. A lot of that, me being my wheelchair mindset, if you come in to see me in a wheelchair and you're not well positioned, that's the first thing I'm going to help you with. And if you need more supports on your wheelchair level, you know, we can loop you right back to the rest of our clinic for that as well. And we're happy to do that all the time. So, you know, basic controller modifications, there's even more than that, but these are just a few that we kind of start with. Then there's also what we call controller substitutions. So like I said, if those little tiny buttons on that controller are borderline impossible for you to get, we will use a switch then. So we'll find a way to plug in a switch to make that be the button you need. So that you could hit it with your side of your hand or bop it with your elbow or even get it with your head. Sometimes if your head is the most, consistent thing to access, we look at any part of your body. We also look at alternative mouse inputs, all kinds of different mice. Like we said, same things that are computer access. For example, that one on the bottom left picture there, that's a trackball mouse. So if you're a computer gamer, PC gamer, then a trackball mouse might be something to try out there. We had a bunch of those. And then there's also even more kind of high tech as a controller substitution as a quad stick. So people with higher level spinal cord injury or anyone that has kind of lost function of their neck down, but maybe you have really good control of your breathing and your mouth and your head and neck control, you can use something like a quad stick to access your computer or your game. Sip and puff is something that's really familiar with those kinds of users because they might even use a sip and puff controller for their wheelchair as well. So a lot of times, like the way that you control your wheelchair is kind of mirroring what you're doing to control your game. But it gets more complex as you go up the order. And then there's a fun word here, oculography. Oculography. So that's like eye gaze. So somebody, maybe you have no really strong control in anything except for your eyes. Okay, if we can make your eyes work for the game, that's the next thing we look at. So there's eye gaze technology. I know my friend Audrey, who spoke at last Tuesday's series, she was going all into, adaptive ways to use your communication device, eye gaze being one of those. So similarly to the wheelchairs, if you have a good way to access a communication device that you use, we can probably figure out a way to make that work for your video game experience as well. And then there's also voice control. Voice control settings are all over the place on setting options, and we can certainly help that. There are so many, it's hard to kind of give you just a few options, and it varies based on what's setup you're using. But voice control is great for anyone that has some sort of physical impairment. You'd rather use your voice to make the thing work. Similarly, you can have everything be read to you. So anyone with any kind of vision impairment, that all kind of falls under the same category. So we can help with all that stuff. All right, so let's get into some examples of things that we have. The fun stuff. This is why you're all here. And then I'll just say again, if anyone has questions about certain things as we're going over, I'll try and contain my excitement and go nice and slow. So if you have questions, please feel free to put it out there in the chat, and Deb will help let me know what questions you have. So I've been talking about switches a bunch. So here are examples of what are we talking about. So a lot of these options are coming straight from that Logitech adaptive gaming kit that we were telling you about. So there's in review kind of just a bunch of switches of different varieties to meet somebody's needs. So this first one on the left is, we call it a light touch button. This is going to be the most highly sensitive button or switch that you can get. So think somebody that you really have very limited movement of your fingers, but you do have movement of your fingers. So maybe you have a lot of weakness and you're really limited in how far you can range your finger. But if you can get it to move a little bit, this would be a button to look at. So it doesn't take a lot of force or energy to make it depress well enough that you can access it. So it requires low force to activate due to its 12 millimeter height. So
Tiny little switch.
Teeny tiny. And what's fun about these switches is we can put them just about anywhere you would need to access them. So if we've got a stick of Velcro, we could stick it to your wheelchair armrest. We could stick it to a gaming board that you might play with. We could stick it to your shoulder if we needed to. So that light touch option, I think, it's a pretty popular one, pretty much for anyone that has any kind of motor impairment. And then we have something called variable triggers. So that's the next one in, moving from the left to the right. The variable trigger is, think kind of like a gas pedal. So for those of us that play racing games or any kind of game where you're driving a vehicle, this does something called proportional activation. So what that means is if you press it just lightly, you'll start driving your character or your vehicle really slow. And if you press it really firmly, it'll drive your vehicle faster. So works just like a gas pedal, and then we can go in and actually, it's called force tuning. We can actually change the settings to see, how far would you need that to go to activate it. So again, similar to somebody that might need a light touch button, if you can't make that variable trigger go down all the way, then we'll limit that range for you. Then moving over to the right, we have small buttons. This is an all-encompassing little term here. So this, buttons could be, a small button could be like, the size of the palm of your hand, even a little bit bigger than that. They are applicable for many, many different people with many, many different needs. Really, this is the first go-to thing we'll look at if you need a switch access. Just like the other ones, it's best for anyone with, motor function impairments, but if you have good strength and good force that you can depress the full button, this is like what we call our start in place. And then we have large buttons, same as small buttons, they're just a bigger size. So maybe you can hit the button okay, but you need to be big enough that, you can target it. Maybe the smaller button, it's easy to miss it. Think somebody that has trouble controlling their body movements. A larger button might be a good place to start as well. We got a whole box full of buttons, actually several boxes of buttons. So we do like to use these all the time.
I have a question about the small buttons. We did a webinar a while ago where we were encouraging parents to start working with their children younger, learning how to use IT, technology. And one thing that came to my mind is wondering, for the small button, is there a way that it could connect to, a stereo, or where a child, if they wanted to hear music, they could do that? Or would they just go the standard route of putting it on their phone? And
there are several ways to do that. I think one that I did most recently with somebody is I set up the button to kind of be a start and stop for the play button on a music video that was on somebody's tablet. So I think when we're looking at children and getting into buttons, to me, having that is a good way to learn that cause and effect. So you learn, okay, I hit this button, I made the music play.
Exactly.
Okay, I hit the button again, I make the music stop. So that teaches you, what does that button do for you, even at a young age. We look at that. I will say things like that are not as much as what we spend the most of our time doing here, but that is a good starting place. We're just trying to see, is this switch going to work for you? Yeah, we absolutely can hook it up to play music or something like that.
Even for a lot younger children, there's multiple programs around the country that does toy adaptation. Mm-hmm. And yes, Deb, you're right. These switches are the kinds of ones, a lot of times even bigger surface area buttons, like those large buttons that are wired into the toy to help with the cause effect, like Christy is saying. So absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so let's get into more fun things. So I talked about 3D printed options earlier. So here are what we call 3D printed controller modifications. So these are something that would be available for really anyone to purchase if you need it. I will say we do not have a lot of these options available in the clinic, just because there are we're getting into hundreds of options that exist out there for it right now. But we can certainly do a lot of things to mock up if that option would work for you. And then like I was saying, give you resources on where to go get these things for yourself. So I'll just kind of briefly go over these, because we're getting into somebody that has a lot more specific and complex needs than maybe the general person trying to get into this. But that first one on the left, that's an example of a modular joystick that's attached to somebody's adaptive gaming controller. And, just like I was saying, if you drive your power chair with this joystick, then it's easy to just kind of put that into the XAC. Next, we have a leg mounted controller. This is somebody that maybe you can't hold the controller itself, but if it's stabilized on something, you can access your buttons and your joysticks. So I like that leg mounted option. It also is something that's easy to have a caregiver or a parent at home help you get that on and off really easily. And once it's on your leg, it's in the same spot every time. Next, we have trigger extensions. That's that crazy, pinkish and greenish thing hanging off the front of that Xbox controller. I think this is somebody that, maybe you have some trouble with grasping and releasing, maybe your hands can do it, but it takes a long time, or maybe just getting your fingers to go into that position to get those triggers out front is harder for you. So having these trigger extensions allows you to kind of bop it with a different side of your hand, and you don't have to make that same posture to grasp it, which is nice because then you can be just as fast and accurate as you need to be for a game. And then the last thing we have is a one-handed controller. That thing looks crazy, but
super cool.
yeah, they are really helpful for somebody. Think somebody maybe had a stroke, or maybe you have cerebral palsy and you only have like one good side. We can set up your whole controller to be one-sided then using something like that. And I will say, as we're talking about these kinds of options, one question I get a lot, I'll just speak to here. People ask, oh, well, since, this is a medical appointment and this helps my medical needs to get me involved in my activity at home, like, would insurance cover any of these items? Unfortunately, the answer to that is no. In most cases, insurance doesn't quite view adaptive gaming controllers and all that as medically necessary, as much as I wish they would.
I think they should. But.
That's a really hard ask of your medical insurance right now. So I will say that a lot of these 3D printed options, because they know that somebody is buying this out of their own pocket, they are made to be as like from price point as accessible as possible as well. So they're not crazy expensive for what they are. And I think it's also good too, because if you're like curious about something, you're like, ooh, I really think this will work, but I've never tried it before. You don't feel like it's like a waste of a large expense. It's something that you could try for a reasonable price.
And we'll talk about later too, like where you can go to maybe get these, whether for a price or with a volunteer group or something like that.
Yeah. All right, so now we're moving along into the fun stuff. So this is the Xbox Adaptive Controller for the XAC. It is, like I was saying earlier, consumer grade. So that means anyone could look it up online and you could buy it right now if you wanted. This, I think, it's just really an excellent option for any kind of gamer with limited mobility. What's really cool and fantastic about this specific controller is that it can work as a standalone controller. So it's pretty much plug and play. If you get this and you have no other switches or nothing else, you can use this controller instead of your other standard one at home. But then what's really cool about it is on the whole back side of it is a bunch of, like you see in that picture there, there's things plugged into it. So there's a whole line of inputs and jacks that you can put in a switch of all kinds of varieties. And it's literally, you can make any button that's on the typical controller into a switch or another joystick. Really cool. So this is compatible with all pretty much Xbox systems. So it's Xbox One consoles and also Windows PC. Button remapping, which is something we'll talk about a little bit more later, is available through the console or through the app. And you can even set this up to have multiple people play on a specific profile. So maybe you have two brothers that play, and one brother needs this setup and another brother needs another setup. You can have different profiles for that. So it's a really complex device. It's really, it's been really helpful. Microsoft as a whole, when they made this, they definitely were listening. They were ears open to the disability community at large. They put a lot of good research and thought into this, and it's been really successful for a lot of my clients. So just a little bit more about the adaptive controller. Once you get that, like I was saying, you could get all kinds of switches, joysticks, buttons to attach to it. I'm just showing you this graphic here. This is from an organization called Warfighter Engage. Gabby's going to speak more about them a little bit later, but they're a wonderful group that kind of shows you like, okay, what can you do with this thing here? So you can hook up all these buttons to mimic or mirror just about anything that exists on the typical controller. Again, super cool.
I have Judy wrote, and I probably should have interrupted you a slide ago. She wrote, however, waiver through DODD could assist with purchase if it can be tied to helping a person to be more independent.
Yes, that's a wonderful tidbit. Thank you very much. Was that Judy that said that?
Judy.
Yes, thank you very much. Yeah, right on. And we talk about that a little bit too.
Yeah, and it has changed a lot, geared towards the fact that, if you say it's for gaming, obviously that would be really scrutinized. But if you're
Right.
looking at independence and why that independence is important, or social, last year it didn't even cover communication, but now it's starting to cover communication because they're realizing that the social aspect is so important for individuals.
Wonderful.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
we have people ask about waiver all the time, and I think the case managers at like OOD and the other waivers, they're very responsive to the questions we have on it. So it's a great resource for sure. Here's just another option. I'll just go over it real quick. There's all kinds of 3D printed things that you can even hook on to a typical controller. This one is called Snapsticks. It's by Warfighter Engaged. Pretty much what you do is you get a little, looks like a guitar pick device, and you unclip the backing, off your typical controller, and this literally snaps right in. So again, think somebody that needs to play one-handed. These pictures, the black on black is a little bit hard to see, but pretty much you could set that joystick that's now facing downward, you could put that on your thigh or on, the bottom of a playing mat that you have, and you can now use one hand to move your player by pushing that joystick down and around. So it's just another option. This is something that we have available in our clinic to try out, and we have a lot of good success with it as well. Main thing here is it allows one-handed gameplay. Unfortunately, of all the controllers that are out there, this needs to have the standard Xbox controller to make it work. It will not work on the Xbox Elite, just because the backing is different on that Elite controller. Here's another one. This is the Nintendo option, kind of their version of the Xbox adaptive controller. So this is called the Flex controller. It's by Hori, and that's Nintendo's kind of proprietary group for making adaptive things and options. So again, this is great for gamers with limited mobility. You can use this essentially just like the XAC to plug in switches or inputs. It's compatible with just the Nintendo Switch right now, but it makes sense because that's who they made it for. You might look at those buttons, and if you're critical mindset like me, you're going to say, okay, well, those buttons aren't really as accessible because they're kind of little and they're small, just like on the typical controller. But it says even on the site, those are really more geared towards caregiver ease of access. So if you were playing with somebody, or you just needed to back up to the home page or something, your caregiver can get those buttons while you have your switches set up for you. And what's cool about this is it's small enough it can be attached to a stand using a camera mount, which apparently needs a 1/4 inch camera screw. But we could help with mounting options too if you were looking for places to make this more permanent setup. Next one I'll dive into, this one is super cool. This is the quad stick. We talked about this just briefly a little while ago. This is for somebody that is really, your only consistent access point is your mouth and your breathing. So the quad stick is something that was developed, put a lot of thought and effort into. It's something that is a really cool device. It can do a lot of things, all through just kind of making sipping and puffing combinations. It also has a Bluetooth module as well, so you don't have to necessarily have it be wired anymore, but that's a separate accessory to buy. If you're like me and you're a very visual person, you're looking at this picture and you're like, okay, what is that actually? I'd like to share a brief little video clip with you guys about what this is and how this actually works. So here we go. It's loading. There we are. I think it had to load the whole page.
Example. I'll wheel right up to it. And all this is on quadstick.com. Again, great invention for people with high functioning disabilities. So the stick acts like a joystick. Up, down, left, right. Moves the guy around. Jumping. Ducking. Running. Check your inventory. Check the map. Identify the guy. Keep that too. All the things that the quad stick does, great thing. You're learning more about it again at quadstick.com. It's great.
So yeah, quad stick is super cool. It allows somebody to just have total access to the game again, all through their mouth. That's something we've helped a user set that up in our clinic in the past. It is, I will say that one is a very pricey, very expensive option, but it really does work very well for somebody that wants to get into that. Another option, you know, if somebody, you know, has limited mobility throughout the rest of their body, another option is eye gaze. So I'm just going to kind of briefly touch on this. I know we're getting into 12:30. We're getting into the period we can talk with everybody. So, you know, if you use your communicating device with eye gaze, that's kind of where users will kind of get into gaming through the same setup. My only comment on this is if you're going to use eye gaze for your communication or for your mobility on a device, me as an OT, I'm just always mindful that I don't want to fatigue you. So if you want to also use eye gaze then to get into games, you know, just be very careful that your eyes get tired kind of sooner than anything else in your body. So I wouldn't want to overuse that if that's your only means of mobility or communication. But these are all things we look at, again, from that holistic perspective. And here's just a brief clip about how somebody can use eye gaze to play a game called Minecraft. This is a group, Special Effect is a UK-based gaming organization, and they have a bunch of software available on their site for free that anyone can download if they have the games to play it. And that allows you to change a video game into an eye gaze setup. So here's just an example of this one. So that is available to download. You saw in the picture there that girl was using her eyes to control all the aspects of that game with the different arrows that were set up, and then she could flip to her inventory page and just look at the inventory she needed to open that up. That is a crazy cool system. I can't believe it's available for free, but there you go. There's a lot of options that are out there like that. And we can help show you what those options look like. Oh, we're playing a video game. There we go. All right, so I want to briefly get into, whoopsies, software options. So this is, you know, like I said, if we found a good hardware way to get you to actually physically access the game, but there's sometimes a lot of good settings that are available on your game to make that even easier for you to access it. So it's all about your in-game experience. So one thing to note is that when we look at the settings, we're looking at it from your device, like system-wide settings, and we're also looking at each individual game that you play will also have its own settings. And those vary very widely. So there's a wide range of options that are available on that we can help you look at. And there's also an option called partner gaming that's available on some consoles and devices where maybe you could play the game, but you need to have a buddy with you playing to help you do certain aspects of it. That's another software option as well. So here's some examples of accessibility settings. All of this is available at a wonderful foundation organization called Able Gamers. It's online. That picture there on the left is actually right from their site. So there's all kinds of ways to increase somebody's access just by the settings alone. So motor and coordination issues, we talked about that quite a bit up to this point. But there's one more thing you can do from a setting standpoint, and that's button remap. So that means, you know, maybe you can use your regular buttons, but you just need them to be in a different position on the controller. So that's what remapping is. You can also make it so that you can hold down the button instead of like repeated pressing that you sometimes need. Think like Mario style games where you gotta make it jump super high and you're pressing down. If that's a hard thing for you to do, we can make that a hold instead in some games. You can change, of course, the difficulty levels. I think that's something where a lot of people start on their own. There's also aim assist for any kind of games that involve shooting targets. So there's all kinds of things out there. These are just a few. For vision, most games have a colorblind option. They also have adjustable font sizes. They have magnifiers, zoom options, and high contrast options. And then for hearing needs, you can turn on subtitles in most all games, especially the ones that are more like open world games or something where you're talking to other characters to complete aspects of what you're doing. Subtitles is great, and you can also identify the speaker in a lot of the games. You can turn on audio and visual cues for some of them, and then text to speech, that one is huge. It has a wide range of people that can be helped by that, even if it's not necessarily a deaf or a hearing need. And then voiceover as well can help with that. And then a few more here. I think a lot of the websites and places that we could give you for resources talk a lot about those things I just talked about, like vision aids, hearing aids, motor and access aids, but they don't talk a lot about, okay, what if it's really just the cognitive aspect of playing the game? Sometimes there are so many things that overwhelm somebody, or it's hard to keep track of certain parts of it. So these are a lot of examples that are out there for cognitive accessibility. That's something that you'd really want somebody to gear into your needs and have you kind of like watch you play the game so that we could figure out what exactly of those options would you need. So I won't get into all of those, but there are a lot that exist just for that. And then if you're...
I'm going to interrupt you for 1 second.
Go ahead.
I know Pam had mentioned early on that she had a few blind consumers that like to game.
Yeah.
So maybe you can ask them now if this is giving you the information that you need, Pam, or that can be part of the Q&A.
Yeah, if Pam or anyone else has any questions, please fire them off.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Go ahead and go forward.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So if anyone is at home and you have your own games and you're looking, okay, where do I go to just explore these? Every gaming console or system has its own settings option. So we got the PlayStation option, the Xbox option, Nintendo, and just typical PC computers. So that's kind of a picture of what screens all look like, but sometimes even getting into that can be overwhelming. Those are things we can help you do as well. Finding where to get that setting turned on. Okay, so then once you're through with a adaptive gaming session with us, you've gotten all the equipment set up, we figured out something that might work. Here's kind of what that whole process looks like start to finish. So how do you get access to the resources? You find us, you get into OT by getting a referral from your physician. And with us, I will say we don't really get referrals for adaptive gaming particularly. A lot of times we call it environmental activities of daily living. That's what gears it towards OT. That's what gears it to your medical needs. So we call it EADL referral, or just a computer access. You can even call it a video gaming referral. But the more general you keep it, the more things we can help you look at. And then obviously you see people like us to help you try out these options. You consult with online forums and resources, like there's one called Can I Play That? And another one, Special Effect, that's one of those videos I showed you earlier. And then we talk to you about where do you go to acquire that option then. So purchasing online versus getting a donation from an organization. There's a whole bunch out there, and we're happy to show you and discuss. So this is just our website here for our Outpatient Assistive Technology Center. Anyone can go look this up at any time, and it talks to you more about how to get a referral to us, or of course you can always call us and just ask about it. And then I'll just give a quick plug here. This is Assistive Technology of Ohio. They are a separate loan closet from us. I think a lot of the folks at OOD even kind of know about them and refer to them as well. They are in partnership with us at Ohio State, and we work with them quite a lot. So anyone that needs to borrow equipment, mainly for like computer access or communication device access, they can help with that. They do not have a lot of video gaming options, but they do have options if you game through your computer. So just things to keep in mind there. We talk about them all the time. And Gabby has just a few more resources to go over with us.
Yeah, so when we're talking about adaptive gaming, there's kind of two different sets of resources we would give you. The first would be resources on guidance for playing your game. So, you got your equipment, how do I set it up at home, or like what games can I play? So the first one we touched on a little bit is the Able Gamers Charity, probably the biggest known adaptive gaming organization in the US here. And one of the unique things they do is they offer peer counseling. So you go onto their site, you click the button that says, I'm a gamer with a disability looking for assistance, and they'll connect you with a peer, oftentimes someone who has a disability as well, to guide you through that process of making video gaming accessible to you, whether that's through the equipment or the online settings too. Christy has mentioned Special Effect, that UK-based organization. They are big on resources and education on custom controller setups, accessibility settings, and game accessibility reviews as well as the software that can make your game more accessible to you. And then again, another one she mentioned was Can I Play That? Is the name of the website. And it's a blog site created by gamers with disabilities for gamers with disabilities. And it provides reviews on the games themselves, the consoles, commentary, news in the adaptive gaming world, and reference guides as well. And then that other side of resources that we would give you is, okay, how do I acquire this equipment that I just trialed here that you told me about? So one that we've talked about already is Warfighters Engaged. They sell online at their store many of their switch and controller modification options that we showed you through this presentation, specializing in those alternative joysticks. Their stuff is 3D printed, but as Christy said, it is consumer grade, which is really cool. Evil Controllers is a big one we've been referring people to. They're just a gaming company that makes modified controllers, and they have an accessibility chapter as well. And so they sell custom one-handed Xbox, PS4, and PS5 controllers, kind of like the Xbox adaptive controller does, where you plug in switches for the certain buttons. Evil Controller sells controllers that has a box hardwired into it with 4 inputs for those switches. So a really cool option if the complex adaptation between the Xbox and the PlayStation isn't really working for you. And they also have thumbstick extensions and modified ports on their controller to help you out. The Controller Project is a really wonderful organization. Started out as a guy who was just trying to make a 3D printed device for his friends. And he and his team make all kinds of 3D printed modifications for controllers, free of charge actually, thanks to some sorts of funding that they have. They also have an online library of modifications. So if you or a friend have a 3D printer, you can try your hand at taking these designs and printing them out yourself, seeing how that goes for yourself. And then lastly, I mentioned Able Gamers again, because not only do they help with guidance, they also do sell a few switches and controller modifications on their online store, typically at a bigger discount than the actual manufacturers of those switches themselves, which is a really helpful thing.
Yeah, they are a charity organization that has a well-known following. They do quite a lot. So if you're looking for any place, you're just kind of curious, I want to look it up, Able Gamers is a good one to start with for sure.
Yeah.
All right, so I just want to be respectful of everyone's time, and if we have more questions, so I'll breeze through these last couple of slides, but I just want to let you guys know that our Smart Clinic here and our gaming program is growing. So we have a lot of future goals. So we're always trying to collaborate within our own hospital system at large. We most recently have been collaborating with the, actually on the academic side, OSU has their own esports program, and we've been collaborating with them to make things more accessible to the gamers that are students with them. And also to kind of, team up and, we're doing things kind of together now. So stay tuned for things with that. there's also, I plug for this, there's always room for more research into the benefits of adaptive gaming. There's a lot of good research out there already that, you know, Gabby spent her whole time with us kind of diving into, but there's always room for more. And then finally, our big thing is we want to, you know, jump into more community groups. So stay tuned. We are looking to team up with Adaptive Sports Club through the Columbus Rec and Parks. So there might be events coming up, maybe fall of this year. So we'll be sure to share those with everybody at the Center for Disability Empowerment as they come up. So here's some references of us. Again, you've met with Gabby. She is wrapping up her things. So Gabby's gonna be entering the career field with us. She just passed her doctoral defense. And here is me. Here's how to get a hold of us. So I'll leave this slide up. And at this time, I want to open it up if anyone else had any questions about anything at all. Thank you guys for listening.
Let's see if I can figure out how to get everybody's on here. Well, I think this is amazing. You know, I have no clue about gaming at all. So I imagine, you know, that you both probably are aware of the language and the gaming and the good, you know, in and outs of the whole thing, so that you can share with the person receiving assistance on making this happen. It's very, very exciting. Here's a chance if anybody has a question.
Well, if I could unmute myself, sorry. I didn't see anything where you guys had mentioned very much about virtual. Kind of been into the Oculus. We actually went and got 2 of them here recently, and I'm a gamer myself, so I know how it's pretty awesome for individuals who are either they're in wheelchair based or whatever. So do you guys provide any training or anything with that?
Yeah, so we do not have a VR system here or anything like that. But towards the end of my time here, I was looking into VR settings. And while we don't have the equipment here, I gave resources to clinicians here about what does exist. And so there is, general accessibility settings on that, not much in, say the Oculus or things like that, where for vision, increased font size, magnification, things like that. But in terms of, the controllers themselves, holding on to it, or like positioning, if you're a seated gamer and you're trying to reach high, you can actually change position height there. There's also a software called Walk-in VR. And when you download this software, and I don't know, how to do it per se, but it allows you to, instead of using controllers, just using your arms. And it has a lot of different accessibility settings built into it. That's kind of the most of what I found for now. I think it's a very up and coming area that they're looking for accessibility. They just kind of like what we've seen, the explosion of accessibility options in the past few years. It'll probably get better as more years go on. But I would encourage you to look into that. It's called Walk-in, WALKIN VR.
Thanks, Gabby. Yeah, I will say too, VR, virtual reality, and extended reality as a whole part of the gaming industry is kind of up to this point. They're interacting with the community at a different level than a lot of the other gaming systems that are well known have been. To this point, they have not made a lot of gaming systems that are very accessibility driven or focused. But just like Gabby's saying, I do see that coming up in the future. We are actually involved here in a online group that consists of a lot of extended reality developers and the big faces and names that are behind a lot of these games and products. And they're asking the questions, how can we make this more accessible? And there's research going into it right now. So I think probably in the next few years, there's going to be more options available. But at this point, there are at least a few to get started with.
Are you guys doing anything with employment and work simulation?
That is not one of our specialties here, but that would be a good question for anyone else at OOD. We do have like a little bit of work hardening programs more in our traditional OT and PT wheelhouse, but not as much in the virtual reality sense.
Thanks.
Yeah. I'm just checking the chat right now to see if anyone else had questions. Oh, Judy, I see you talking. I think you're muted.
Sorry, I did ask a question in regards to the referral. You said it's
Yeah.
best to put it under environmental, and I didn't get the last part of that.
You can just say EADLs, environmental activities of daily living. Any OT referral will involve activities of daily living, but us here in the smart clinic and the gaming space is more geared towards the environment and the technology. You could also say assistive technologies as well.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah. Well, thanks everyone again so very much. We had so much fun presenting this with you. Did anyone else have any questions?
I'm very grateful that you spent the time to prepare this presentation. And I mentioned in the beginning that we are recording it and will be editing it. And for those who signed up to participate today, we were sending the link of the edited version. If you would be so kind, I'm going to send you a 3-question survey once I create it, but that would help support us using the grant from the Department of Developmental Disabilities. So I would be grateful if you'll be able to give me that support. And you know, Pam, I had no idea there were that many adaptations as well. So
World than you imagine, but when you step into it, you're like, wow. I can attest to. So
yeah, would this PowerPoint be made available for me to send out as well?
Yes, I was just gonna say I'm happy to send it to you, and it can be dispersed so people can reference it.
That sounds great.
links
Yeah.
to resources in there too. So
So I want to be remembering next week we have our smart home presentation at the same time, 11:30 to 1 p.m. on Tuesday, but you have to register. So maybe I'll put that in the link, you know, in my email as well. There's so much to learn, and I actually use a lot of smart home technology at home as I'm getting, you know. When I don't wear my hearing aids at night, I can't see well in the dark, if you know what I mean. I can't determine what's around me. So, but anyway, thank you, ladies, so much for your time. And for those of you who've given time to learn more, to help the people that we care about with assistive technology. Thank you for joining us.
thank you.
Thanks so
See you guys.
much. Bye-bye.